with the perspective of having completed your project and got it out of the way, finally, when you look back at the whole kind of, what would it have been, 8 months, 9 months working on the thing, were there any real points at which that were really difficult that you needed? Was there any sense of real hurdles to overcome at any point? I wondered if there were and what they were, and anything you'd like to say about any kind of breakthrough moments.
Yes, there were quite a few hurdles for me because it was an action research project. I needed to get my colleagues involved, and initially there was that anxiety and stress that it's going to be a change and we're not really sure about it. I was also new to the setting, which didn't help either, because they didn't really know me. So that was a little bit tricky. So that, and then their concern about it was at the time when their reports needed to be done for children and various other things. So it was about really appreciating timing and supporting some of those colleagues that perhaps hadn't been used to change for quite some time and had just worked along that route for, say, 5 to 10 years. So yes, that was a big hurdle for me. And in respect of sort of the feedback, if you like, when I was dealing with the tutor that I was assigned, having that, don't worry, this can be usual process and hang on in there if you feel it's going right, gave me the strength to really try and support those colleagues and be behind them and take on their point of view rather than just giving up. So I think it's very important to have that communication with your tutor as well, just because they've had so much experience and they've come across many people struggling in their projects before, so that was good.
It's very interesting, thank you for that. Very interesting that you highlighted the tutor or supervisor. Have you any thoughts about the nature of the role of supervisor? I'm interested very much in how students do perceive what the relationship, if you like, should be with the supervisor. I wondered, for example, if it was different from what you anticipated in any way. What should it be? And please do feel free and candid to talk about any aspect of the relationship with your particular supervisor.
For me, I was a distance learner, so all the reading I'd done of the modules up until the project, I had worked very much on my own, but linking in with a tutor every few months, often by telephone. So I hadn't had much face-to-face contact. So when it came to doing the project, all of a sudden, I'm very much involved in the university. I'm attending project days and there's many tutors there who I've never heard of before or seen. So I think I was different to perhaps students who'd been studying here full-time because I felt very supported, more so than I had up until the point of the project. So I think my perspective is probably different, having heard other students talking, because I'd been used to working very much alone.
Thank you. And thinking about the obviously basing it on your experiences, but thinking about the nature of relationship with the supervisors in a general sense, are there any things that you see as really important in ensuring that there's a strong relationship with the supervisor?
With the tutor that you've been assigned?
Yeah.
I was quite lucky because I was assigned somebody who had been a tutor of mine before, so I already had a relationship with her. And because I knew a little bit of how she worked, it was very easy for me because I knew that I had to email her regularly and just ask for an appointment because I knew she had lots of things going on. So for me, that was okay. And I've come from a business background as well. So I've been used to organising meetings and thinking about planning and knowing when to organise to discuss something. But I think perhaps for a younger person who perhaps needs more feedback from a tutor, it would be different. But I was actually sending emails, this is where I'm at, can we meet please? And she always did, of course, she was right behind me. But yeah, I very much took that initiative.
And is there anything you wanted to say about your perception of how you get the best out of your contact with your tutor?
Yeah, I would try and use them as much as you possibly can. You know, they know all the books. They might not necessarily have delved into this topic you're going into in that great detail, but obviously they've supported many students doing projects, so they've got an idea of how you're feeling and what you're going through. But also talking things through with them, they're going to come up with ideas and suggestions, which will, you know, may take you off on a different route that you hadn't thought about. So it's always important to get the best out of your tutor, really, and really use them for what they're there for.
That's really interesting. So you are saying that they don't have to be experts in the particular area you're looking at, because they can bring a whole lot more.
Well, I think it'd be quite difficult. I mean, in my case, I was doing a project which was based on Montessori, and I did have a tutor who was based at the Montessori College, but that may not have been the case. And therefore I may have been going into an area which perhaps they weren't so familiar with. And that can also have a good point to it, because they would come up with things that you might not think about, because you're so in that mindset of, for me, for Montessori, having someone look at it from a different point of view might say, well, you know, I don't know much about it from this point of view, so what about da 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 da? And that could make you have a sort of light bulb moment, think, I hadn't even thought of looking at it from that perspective. So I think talking things through is very helpful.
That's brilliant, thank you. One last question, if I may. Could you tell us how useful, be honest please, how useful you found all the WebLearn kind of study guidance materials? I mean, part of this project is very much about making them better and more interactive, this thing we're doing now. But were there any things you found to be particularly useful? Were there any things that were confusing or less than useful? Or indeed, were they not that helpful at all, perhaps?
I thought the video links were great because it brings it alive. So I think more video, especially when you're studying, you do so much reading. And if you can learn something by looking at it visually and just taking a moment with a cup of tea, you're still learning, you're still doing what you need to be doing, but you're taking a step back from just reading. And I think that's really helpful, and can also just consolidate everything that you've read and help you make sense of what you've been reading. So that was very useful.
That's brilliant. It's inspired one last question. Although I'm going to forget it by going on this long thing, that I've got one last question. Thinking about all the component parts of the dissertation, was there anything that was particularly difficult to unravel and make sense of? I mean, it may be a particular physical section of the dissertation, or it may be a more conceptual aspect of what it is, getting to grips with what it is you're expected to do.
Mm-hmm. Initially, I thought the literature review was going to be very difficult, because you read so much, and I thought, how am I going to actually condense this to what I really need to say? But luckily that sort of came together, and what I found hard, which I thought would be easy, was getting your findings down on paper. How are you going to display those? How are you going to show them so that you know you can see what's actually happened? So for me, at the end, where I thought I was all excited about being able to show my findings, I actually found that the hardest part to do. So the project session that we had about findings was very useful, coming up just those couple of months before we were likely to be reporting it, because I did actually struggle with that area.